Romantic theory matters in historical context because it lets us read the past with a gentler, clearer eye. When we ask why people chose who they chose, or how they learned to trust again after a heartbreak, we're really asking how love was imagined, negotiated, and made real long before our modern ideas about romance existed. So we lean into history, not to judge it, but to understand how love grew in soil that wasn't always soft, and how those roots still shape our own hearts. Across centuries, lovers whispered in languages their grandchildren wouldn't fully understand. And yet the ache of longing feels surprisingly familiar. Romantic theory isn't just about springtime spark. It's about a culture learning to trust affection enough to risk change. In medieval courts, love was often a public ritual wrapped in duty, honor, and lineage. The courtly romances practiced a kind of reverence and ideal of beauty and fidelity that could bend rigid rules. It was not always easy or fair, and sometimes it concealed power dynamics masquerading as tenderness. Yet even then, people believed that affection could illuminate moral choices, could sharpen courage, could soften the edges of obligation. When we peek at letters and diaries from centuries past, we glimpse a tension between what a person felt and what society expected. Romantic theory helps us map that tension. It teaches us to read not just the sweetness of a confession but the context. It asks us to notice what a lover is allowed to hope for and what must be earned through patience, persuasion, and shared endurance. In many historical moments, love didn't always win on first sight, it won through persistence. Through tiny acts of trust that accumulated into something sturdier than a momentary thrill. In the Renaissance and the early modern period, the idea of love shifted. It could be a route to self-discovery, a path toward a more humane understanding of others, or a mirror held up to what a society valued. Romantic theory isn't a passport to instant bliss. It's a toolkit for asking better questions. What does loyalty look like when personal growth means stepping away from comfort? How do you keep tenderness alive when power is uneven? And when tradition shouts louder than your own heartbeat? When we study big shifts, epic wars, migrations, revolutions, the role of romance changes shape. Sometimes it becomes a language of solidarity, a way for communities to imagine futures beyond scarcity and fear. Sometimes it becomes a reminder that love is not a luxury but a practice, choosing again to listen, to forgive, to keep showing up even when the way forward is foggy. Romantic theory invites us to treat love as a kind of work, a craft that grows with time and attention. That's a stubborn, hopeful idea. That affection isn't merely a feeling that arrives and departs, but a garden you tend, season after season. In the age of letters, lovers learned to be brave with their words. They sent messages across distances, risking misinterpretation and gossip, hoping that honesty could outlast rumors. Romantic theory helps us hear how those letters carried more than love. They carried envisioning of a life that was possible when two people decided to shoulder the future together. And those historical conversations remind us that trust is built, not just felt. Trust grows in shared routines, the small rituals of daily care. The way you show up when a plan derails. The way you listen for the other person's fear and respond with steadiness. Beyond the romance of lovers, there's romance of communities. Think of siblings, friends, neighbors who believed in a future where tenderness might heal old injuries. Romantic theory invites readers to see how social norms around marriage, class, and gender shape the stories of love. It doesn't condemn those norms wholesale, it questions them with care, inviting us to imagine alternatives that still honor the dignity of people who feel deeply. The result is a richer sense of romance as something larger than a single kiss. It's a collective art of choosing kindness, perseverance, and a hopeful curiosity about what comes next. We see this in the quiet, intimate moments of history, the way weather, architecture, and cuisine frame a romance. The way a shared meal becomes a ceremony of belonging. Romantic theory teaches us to notice how ordinary settings, kitchens bright with sunlight, a sea-washed quay, a room full of faded portraits offer the spaces where love can grow. The historical lens doesn't sanitize love. It reveals how love navigates scarcity, how it steadies people when the world feels uncertain, how it can become a beacon that keeps families intact and communities resilient. In modern times, the echoes of these old theories aren't dusty relics. They are living conversations that remind us to look for complexity, to honor both passion and responsibility, to accept that true connection sometimes requires monumental patience. Romantic theory in historical context helps us see that happily ever after isn't the absence of struggle. It's the stubborn presence of two people who choose each other again and again, even when circumstances push them apart. It's a reminder that love, when nurtured, can reshape a life, a family, a neighborhood. So why does this matter to you today? Because romance is a bridge between who we were and who we want to be. It teaches us to value empathy as a form of courage, to treat vulnerability as a strength, and to meet fear with patient determination. When a story lets us see how lovers in the past solved problems, how they forgave, how they fought for space to breathe, how they refused to abandon hope, we feel less alone. We are reminded that love isn't a myth to chase but a possibility to cultivate, in our own time and place, with the same humanity that has carried lovers forward for centuries. And perhaps, in the quiet listening between lines of old letters and new messages, we hear a truth that feels timeless. Romance is less about perfect endings and more about the ongoing choice to be a better partner, friend, and human. Historical romance theory invites us to savor the journey, the messy, surprising, and tender journey that leads us to a future where love is not just a spark but a practice we sustain. If we can hold that with a gentle optimism, we'll find that the past doesn't stand between us and a hopeful tomorrow. It can light the way. So the next time you encounter a love story, give it the room to breathe in history, the textures of its era, the weight of its choices, the longing that carried it forward. You may find that, in learning why romantic theory mattered then, you discover how it still matters now, as a compass for tenderness, resilience, and the belief that love, in the right hands and at the right time, can still become a truly transformative force. Some readers wonder whether these old theories still matter when the world moves so fast. They do. Because romance theory reminds us that love is not a whim but a long-term project of understanding another person's interior weather. When historians call a moment pivotal, they often naming how couples negotiated scarcity, distance, and risk, and how those choices echoed through the generations. Across villages and capitals, letters traveled slower than ships or trains, and yet they carried a map for the heart. Romantic theory gives us the language to ask what a lover was willing to risk to protect a promise, and what a community might gain when two people chose to grow together rather than simply find a spark and move on. In many places, reform and public voice widened the room for affection to mature. The theory doesn't erase inequality. It gives us a lens to study where tenderness challenged those inequalities and where it reinforced them, so we can learn to do better today. You can hear it in diaries where a marginal note, a whispered plan, or a carefully kept gift becomes a rebellion against the boundary lines drawn by class or creed. Love grows as a practice, not a pause button. Patience becomes an instrument, trust a craft. So, in our modern moment, romantic theory matters because it asks us to hold both desire and responsibility, to imagine futures where partnership means shared strength. If you take one idea from this exploration, let it be this. History invites us to practice the simplest form of romance, showing up for another day, again and again, with kindness as the compass. Think of the people who kept a promise despite hardship, who whispered through walls of sound because conversation mattered more than convenience. Romantic theory helps us translate those acts into language we can learn from: resilience, negotiated intimacy, and the bold choice to stay. It invites us to notice the small rituals that keep trust alive, the letters tucked into pockets, the quiet meals after far journeys, the stubborn faith that one more week might bring a breakthrough. Let us carry that cadence forward. In classrooms, in couples, in communities. The history of romance becomes a guidebook for how we treat each other when the days feel ordinary. And when the days demand courage. It asks us to couple imagination with responsibility. To cherish consent as a living practice. And to honor growth as a shared project. If this journey through time has reminded you that romance is a practice, not a page-turning instant, then you've found the thread that links us across centuries. Love is a human project, forever evolving.